Federal prosecutors are treating the El Paso, Texas mass shooting inside a Walmart as a case of domestic terrorism. The U.S. attorney there says his office is investigating the 21-year-old white male suspect for hate crime charges and firearm charges, which carry a penalty of death. The El Paso district attorney also says his office will seek the death penalty. Officials say the suspect drove about 10 hours to get to the El Paso Walmart that was packed with back-to-school shoppers on Saturday morning and opened fire, killing 20 people and wounding 26 more. The El Paso police chief says the suspect surrendered without incident. We're told he's speaking freely and has been forthcoming with information. And about 20 minutes before the shooting in El Paso took place, a hate-filled diatribe appeared online, believed to be linked to the shooter. The unsigned essay was posted on an extremist website and said the attack was motivated by anti-immigrant hatred, specifically mentioning a Hispanic invasion of Texas. The post draws direct inspiration from the mass murder of Muslims at 2 mosques in New Zealand in March that left 51 people dead. In that attack, the suspect published an essay online promoting a white supremacist theory called the Great Replacement. The theory argues that elites in Europe have been working to replace white Europeans with immigrants from the Middle East and North Africa. The diatribe, potentially linked to the El Paso killings, begins, "In general, I support the Christchurch shooter and his manifesto. This attack is a response to the Hispanic invasion of Texas." As the New York Times points out, if the essay is linked to the El Paso gunman, it potentially underscores the global spread of white supremacist ideology in the age of social media and at a time when immigration in America and elsewhere has become a divisive political topic.
Well, it's important to remember that the Christchurch shooter's manifesto actually took his inspiration in part from the white supremacist shootings in South Carolina. And you can look at Pittsburgh. You can connect the dots. Now, there are, again, we don't know what moves shooters to do certain things. And anybody that takes a gun and goes in and mows down people in schools or churches or Walmarts obviously have diseased minds, and there are a lot of different things working on it. Here, though, in this instance at least, it's not about him saying he's a Republican or saying he's a Democrat, because he said he doesn't like Democrats or Republicans. But it's about this guy specifically using words that are similar to Donald Trump's, and also talking about how Texas may end up, actually says Texas will go Democratic in the coming elections to come because more Hispanics are, quote, invading Texas, which, of course, has been the president's theme for the past 4 years, that Mexicans and Hispanics are invading America. And, you know, the president's rhetoric, it's raised concerns in real time about the violence that it could engender. Mm-hmm. And every time he has ignored one warning after another. And also, I think this is even more important, his Republican allies on the Hill, also corporations that are supporting Donald Trump's reelection, also business people who are supporting Donald Trump's reelection because they might like a tax cut, but they don't care about the racism. They don't care about the white supremacy. They don't care about what the man who they're writing checks for in corporations, who they're writing checks for, CEOs of companies, whose PACs are giving to Donald Trump because they might like a tax cut. They've remained silent as well. They're allowing his rise. They're working hard for his reelection, despite his white supremacy, despite his violent rhetoric. And despite that violent rhetoric going back to the start of the president's campaign 4 years ago, we're going to look at, though, just some of the past 2 years. Here was the president's reaction to a torch rally chanting hate slogans in Charlottesville, Virginia, the night before an anti-racism protester was murdered and many others were injured in a mass attack.
I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either. They didn't put themselves down as you, and you had some very bad people in that group. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
Very fine people. Now, again, it's very interesting that Trump supporters on Twitter and on other networks will actually say he wasn't talking about the neo-Nazis. That president right there, he was talking about the white supremacists and neo-Nazis carrying torches and chanting neo-Nazi chants. All right, so you guys need to stop making fools of yourself and stop enabling a guy who is actually giving the okay, the presidential good housekeeping sign of approval to white nationalists. Just don't shame yourselves anymore. I know it's going to be hard because you've spent the past several years lying and covering up for this president and trying to pretend he's not a white supremacist. And that, of course, goes for you CEOs who allow your companies to continue to write checks to support the political rise of this white supremacist president. I wonder if your shareholders are really okay with that, because I can't believe they would be. But anyway, after the president preached moral equivalency between anti-Nazi protesters and Nazis, Professor Paul Staniland of the University of Chicago wrote this: I study violence, killing, political disorder for a living. I have a pit in my stomach after today's press conference. Total moral collapse. Odds of non-state violence soar when state officials give it cover and legitimacy. Dangerous and staggeringly irresponsible. And last fall, a deranged man whose lawyer says he was inspired by what he heard from the president and Fox News sent pipe bombs to kill Donald Trump's critics, targeting George Soros, the Clintons, the Obamas, CNN, and others. Here's what Mika said as that was unfolding.
The president didn't pack those mail bombs. He didn't grind up the shards of glass intended to maim and kill. But he did something else. He undermined American values and dehumanized those who dare to question his conduct. He ginned up a type of feverish hysteria based on race and religion and political party, and it has the potential to lead to what we saw happen yesterday, and we don't even know if it's over.
And it continues. And what was the president's reaction? It was to mock the people who actually had bombs sent to them, saying CNN had, quote, gone wild about how he was not presidential. The RNC chair, Ted Cruz, and others joined him in criticizing the media and targets of the pipe bombs. Well, the violence went on. A man bent on punishing a synagogue for assisting refugees, the same refugees that Donald Trump and Stephen Miller castigate daily, killed 11 people in Pittsburgh amid an election where the president made repelling a caravan of migrants and sending troops to the southern border a nightly rallying cry.
Democrats want to invite caravan after caravan of illegal aliens to pour into our country. I don't think so. That's an invasion. I don't care what they say. I don't care what the fake media says. That's an invasion of our country.
It happens at every rally. The rallies keep getting worse. The Nazi chants go up from the crowd, send her back. Then they are. They are. You can look at history. They are. And yet that sort of rhetoric that CEOs are funding with their support of Donald Trump, leaders of business in America are supporting that sort of white supremacy. They are funding that man and his hate campaign that gives inspiration to white supremacists and white supremacy. Now, that rhetoric, of course, continued to heat up throughout the campaign warning of, quote, large-scale crime and disease from immigration. Plagues. Other networks talked about plagues coming to the United States and using invasion rhetoric, even though he said he had heard the warnings.
You know, a lot of people don't like the word invasion. We have a country that's being invaded by criminals and by drugs. It's an invasion of our country. We have an invasion of drugs, invasion of gangs, invasion of people. We're on track for 1 million illegal aliens to rush our borders. People hate the word invasion, but that's what it is.
That last soundbite was from March 15th. And that was the day when a racist gunman killed 50 people at a mosque in New Zealand, hoping to spread his hatred worldwide. And as Eddie Glaude warned on our show that day, this.
What's interesting about this is not just simply anti-immigration. There's an ideology driving this. The New York Times reported that he listed in their manifesto his white nationalist heroes. What it reveals is that there's an epidemic of hatred and fear that's engulfing the world. And we need to be mindful in our own rhetoric and in our own actions how we're pushing it.
But the president never tones down his rhetoric. In fact, for those of you who are funding Donald Trump's re-election campaign, you may want to take note that because you keep writing checks to this president, it's on you. It really is. It's all on you because you are funding this white supremacist campaign. CEOs. You really are. Business people, millionaires and billionaires. It's your money that is funding this white supremacy because you won't tell him to stop. Mm-hmm. You won't tell him. Talk about the economy and I'll write you a check. Keep up the white supremacist attacks and I'm going to ask for a refund. But you won't do it. Why is that? Are you a white supremacist? Does your company support white supremacy? Does a corporation that you run, do they support white supremacy? Because the attacks and the attempts continue. Remember, the hit list from the domestic terrorist in the Coast Guard case and the president's pitiful period of silence when federal authorities were investigating. We told you in real time how dangerous this was. Not a word from Trump, not a word from Mitch McConnell, not a word from Kevin McCarthy, not a word from the Justice Department.
Joe,
that is pathetic. And by the way, Donnie, you know Trump. Does he know what he's doing? Does he know what he's doing here? What he's encouraging by remaining silent?
Is he hoping for a deflection?
Of course he knows.
He knows exactly what he's doing. And by the way, there were media members, obviously, that were on that target list. We took it a little personally. But more importantly, that target list, you actually had Nancy Pelosi. And guess what? Here we go, CEOs that fund Donald Trump's campaign. You know who else was on that kill list? People that were running against Donald Trump for president. The Democratic field that was running against Donald Trump for president of the United States, he's encouraging his supporters, and his supporters are listening to that encouragement. And so he's actually putting Donald Trump's political opponents on a kill list. And Donald Trump, he doesn't criticize that, does he? You ever hear Donald Trump really go out and criticize a man who put his political opponents on a kill list while he was collecting guns and had a list of people that he was going to gun down? Donald Trump. And Republicans. Republicans said nothing about it. How interesting. And just the last month, we have witnessed the hatred the president has directed at minority members of Congress after trashing Elijah Cummings for the last week. On Friday, Trump tweeted, quote, "Really bad news. The Baltimore house of Elijah Cummings was robbed. Too bad." The president even mocking a robbery of a member of Congress. You know, the president sees a break at a congressional member's house as something to laugh about, something to mock. But this is a man who laughs off the prospects of deadly violence against those he does not want in his country. Here's Donald Trump last May.
This is an invasion. When you see these caravans starting out with 20,000 people, that's an invasion. I was badly criticized for using the word invasion. It's an invasion. But how do you stop these people? You can't. There's no... That's only in the panhandle you can get away with that statement. Only in the panhandle. So it's a tough situation.
So he says invasion repeatedly. He said, what can we do to stop them? Somebody says, shoot them. Much like what happened this past weekend. What is Donald Trump's response? Is his response like John McCain when somebody said Barack Obama was a Muslim? Not that there's anything wrong with that. No, he laughs, tells a joke. The whole crowd laughs at a person saying, shoot them. And then he goes on and starts talking about the invasion again. Mike Barnicle, the people in the crowd are complicit. Republicans are complicit. And I will say again, businesses, CEOs, the PACs they run, they give money to Donald Trump for this white supremacy that he's now running on. They're complicit as well.